Welcome everyone to Spinnovation, the first inaugural episode as a video podcast. And my first guest today is Stefan Engeseth. Stefan is an author, speaker, advisor, and coach, and has written 4 books about strategies for innovation. And they have been translated to 6 or 7 languages, and there are 9 or 10 more languages in the pipeline. Stefan is from Sweden, and funnily enough, his books have never been translated to Swedish. In fact, he has met people that thought the writer was American because he's quite un-Swedish, let's say that. He's not very modest. Welcome, Stefan.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm super happy that you could join me for this episode, and we do know each other a little bit from before, but the audience here they might know about your books, and for those that don't, I think they would be very curious and interested in your books, because they are, or at least the most famous one of them is based on a very peculiar but very interesting strategy, and it's about sharks. Your whole theory for innovation is called Sharkonomics. And maybe show us that scary cover that you have on
Yeah.
on the book.
Looks like this.
Yeah, now we're entering horror movie ground here. So, and you also have some really prominent forward writers there. Daniel Pink, Marshall Goldsmith, and a blurb there from Philip Kotler. That's wonderful, Stefan.
Thank you so much. They're really legends, all of them. So.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure you'll become a legend also, if you not already are in some circles. But
Thank you.
Tell us, what is Sharkonomics?
Well, since I live in Sweden, and we are the country of consensus, and I will never get that in my genes. So a lot of corporations, they call me and they say, why don't you come over to us and attack us, show how you will attack us as a competitors. And I couldn't find good strategies, because there's only one species writing books, and we are wired in a way that when we find a solution, we don't change it. So when I go through all the books in strategy and business development and so on, what I found is that it's the same type of thinking in all of them. So I couldn't find any new ways that I thought was really amazing. And in my opinion, I'm not so impressed of Homo sapiens.
As a species in general.
Yeah, as in general. I'm the humble Swede, so that's why. So I found Homo sapiens maybe not also genius as we think. And probably I think so. I've been thinking so since I was 6 years old, because I see what we've done with the wars and the planet and so on. So we're not connected to nature. So I thought, well, maybe nature has more to give me than Homo sapiens libraries. So I turned to nature and I found sharks, which I always been fascinated about. Since I was small, I've always been fascinated about animals that's been here for a long time. And sharks has been here for 420 millions of years, before we had libraries, before we had trees, before we had animals on land and so on. And they've been adapting and developing, and they've been hanging around with dinosaurs and so on. And if we mess things up a little bit more than we have done on this planet, they're still going to be here if we leave the planet. That's how adaptable they are. So I found it really amazing. So I turned to nature and I found this great strategies which I could adapt to business. But all the things I'm doing, I'm not creative studying them. I started them together with science people, the best science people in the world for 3 years. I did take diving certification. I did swim with them in South Africa. They did like me a bit too much, a bite too much, because I had 30 kilos more of flesh on me at that time, but I'm losing weight every time I meet them because I want to be the thinnest guy in the water. That's the background. Yes.
Is that one of your advice for companies?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for loose weighters to call me up and do a lecture for them, because just put people in the shark cage, and when they see how happy the shark is to meet fleshy people, they will not. When they go home, they don't dare to open the refrigerator because they will feel the fear of the shark. So that's it's actually, my book is the best lose weight book there is.
Okay, so
there.
it's a weight loss book, not
Yeah.
about innovation strategy.
No. but
no,
actually,
but seriously,
yeah,
Stefan, you actually went out there. You went with the researchers. You dove with the charts, and you sort of like observed them, and you noticed that they had behaviors that actually we could benefit from.
Yeah. Absolutely. So so what I did is I did take this 420 million years of evolution, and I boiled it down to 10 attack strategies and 10 defense strategies. And I may be the only one in the world holding defense strategies workshops, because there's no one writing about it. And I believe in the future there will be one person in the board who will be the defense director in organizations. Just as we have in sports and military, we have to think about defense, but we don't do so in corporations. So and
maybe, of course, if you speak about defense, it sounds a bit passive, and unfortunately the business world is very much associated with being more aggressive and at least offensive, and not offensive in offending other people, but on the offensive. So yes, that's a pretty interesting point, because I haven't thought about it that way before. But yeah, please continue. So 10 strategies for attack, 10 for defense.
Yeah. I've been holding a lot of workshops when it comes to defense, and when people should discuss it, it often starts with quietness, because we don't have the language to talk about defense. Often they start to talk about sport, because in business we don't have the language to talk about defense. So they start to talk about having Zlatan as a goalkeeper and that kind of thing. But it's how we are wired. We educate people in schools only to think about attack, sales, marketing, and that stuff. We don't pay people to think about defense. If you have a CEO talking about defense, they would think he thinks more backwards than forwards. And also the magazines, the business magazines, they don't like to talk about a CEO talking about thinking backwards. But if you look at the market leaders, they have more to lose than to win many times. And just like the sharks that were loving me a bit too much when I was really flashy, it's the same with market leaders. They're really flashy. And and that's also the problem with the evolution of their corporations, because when they're flashy, they get fat and happy. And when you're fat and happy, you lean back to save energy and you get conservative. And when you are conservative, you turn into a prey. So a lot of the Fortune 500 corporations are actually only preys. They're not sharks. So they hire me for getting into the attack mode. And they don't know how to move forward, especially now in this situation when everything stands still. It is a terrible situation in a lot of kinds, but in the shark nature, they love when things stand still. Then it's the perfect time to attack. So for a shark, this is a great opportunity. They're not so emotional.
but just for the viewers' sake, when we are recording, we are sort of like 1 year into the corona pandemic, and hard to say when it will end. So that's why you said what you said here right now. But in general, when companies, what does it take for a company to actually contact you and asking you to please show us where we are weak and how we can protect ourselves from attacks and maybe even become sharks ourselves again?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, when the larger a corporation are and the longer they've been around, the more they have a legacy that turns into a passive attitude on the market. And there is some CEOs calling me saying, can you come and contact me? I only have yes sayers in the board. And I ask them, why do you have yes sayers in the board? And they say, well, do you want me to pay you or not? So it's our nature. We like people who say yes, and we like people who agree with us, that we could play golf with, and all. It's sort of a consensus. We don't like people who challenge us too much in the lead, in the top of the organization. So I'm the person who, when I was working in big corporations, every week, every Friday, I have a meeting with my boss, and he go through all the people who want to fire me in the organization, because I'm not that kind of person. I have my own opinion. Doesn't matter if there's a million having another opinion. I have my opinion. I've been that kind of person since the sandbox. And actually, the same company that wanted to fire me as an employee, they hire me today to do workshops and lecturing and consultancy, because I'm not a threat when I'm a consultant. But to have a person like me employed, I'd never recommend that, because I'm too much. I want to change too much. Having me as an employee, they will cry after 2 weeks. That's how much I want to change things. But in the right level, it could be good to have a person that says no and disagree with them and come with different ideas and show them their vulnerability. Just like you use a hacker to show the weaknesses in the firewall, they use me to show the weaknesses in the business models and the strategies and the products and so on. So that's what I do.
So basically kind of like a white hat business hacker.
Yeah, a white hat with jaws. That's me.
Yeah,
a white shark.
Exactly, white shark. But I was thinking about this thing about being a yes man or a team player. Doesn't have to be the same thing, but maybe it's often is. And not that long ago, I was actually watching this Churchill movie, and was struck by one thing. I presume it's historically accurate, but I don't know. But he had some really tough critics that he sort of like he still won out over them. But then he brought them into his war cabinet instead of just not having to deal with them anymore. He actually brought them into the war cabinet because he wanted to have contradictory opinions in that room. He understood that it was important. He wasn't there to be, having everyone just agreeing with him.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it's hard to structure and foster in your own company, but it hasn't have to be contentious. It can still be very constructive, but sort of like allowing for that. Exploring and also exposing or airing contrary points of view, and at least take them into consideration.
Yeah, I'm highly dyslexic, and I write books, so I see things in pictures.
So maybe you should write comics then.
Yes, good point. Good point.
No, but I'm actually amazed that you, as a struggling with the dyslexia, still managed to write books.
Thank you
it's
very
amazing.
much. It's when I started to write my first book, my language was so poorly that the software I was using couldn't identify the language I was trying to write in.
Sorry for laughing, but
So, so the software asks me to pop out a pop-up question, and it says, I'm really sorry as a software, but I don't know how to correct your language. Is it Swedish, English, or Turkish you try to write in? And one of my biggest dream is to meet that person who wrote that code. That's a personal dream for me to do, and I know I'm gonna meet that person one day and say thank you, because that was so fun to get that question.
could you apply any of your shark tactics on sort of like overcoming that difficulty then? Because obviously you have been able to write 4 books at least.
Yeah, I can, because it's so easy for me to break down things and see new patterns, and I think that's very connected to dyslexia, and kids are really amazing in finding solution and compensate for the weaknesses they're having. So I think as a kid, I was compensating my weakness with words and to see new patterns. And as you as a person are painting pictures, I'm painting pictures in my with my creativity to find solutions. And when you were explaining that some corporations have people who disagree with them, I saw a picture of when I go to a board meeting, and if it's a sometimes they ask me, can you sit in and just listen to us when we speak with each other, to detect if we are having, what kind of language we're having when we talk with each other. And then I sit in the room so they can't see me, and I close my eyes.
But so, I mean, they know you're there, obviously, right? It's
Yeah,
not like you're
yeah.
sitting in a secret room with a mirror, a window into the.
No, but it's sort of a, I don't want my ego to take part in the room. I want to
Sure.
be,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's, there are a few times when I'm very humble, and this is one of the times, and they pay me to be that. But also, I sit in the room, I close my eyes, because it's easier for me to focusing on what they're saying and how to speak with each other, and I don't know who's saying what. And then I can detect, are they building on each other's, is it a positive dialogue, or is some, do they agree to disagree with each other, and so on. And when you disagree, you can do it in a constructive way, or you can do it in a negative way, and so on. So the language we're using when we talk to each other is really important. And in the beginning, I did a big mistake, because they hired me, and they started to hire me, a lot of corporations, saying that, we heard that you're really cocky, and can you come to us and we will pay you. The more cocky you are, the more aggressive you are, we will pay you more. And that was a big mistake from the client, a big mistake from me, because they're nearly starting to cry after 5 minutes, because I tear them down, as I'm saying to them, well, the reason for you number one on the market is not because you're good, it's because competition are really lazy. And if they hired me, you get into trouble quickly. So, and that's the case in many business fields, and people don't like to hear that. So, but they need to hear it, because otherwise competition is coming. And the reason for why we haven't got competition is often denial. We deny we this is how people working. Well, we don't see the problem. We have no problems. And the worst case, they do like this, and especially if you have a specialist, it's like this. They don't see what's they don't see what's around them. So,
But and obviously, I mean, you are not a scary guy. You're actually quite a kind and nice person. But
thank you.
the reason why the companies hire you, and why people should hire you, is because they hire you for your brutal honesty, right? And your way to sort of like come from a totally different perspective and just spotting all their weaknesses. Are you as good as also sort of like picking out their strengths? And I guess that comes into then the um, final both attack and defense strategy, I guess.
Yes, I, I do. Strengths and weaknesses are very can be the same thing depending on how you use them. And so, for instance, because I'm dyslexic, it goes quicker for me to study things in reality. That's why I dive with sharks, because I learn quickly that how a prey react. It's if you are in control, for instance, and you look at the shark, and they will feel that you can defend yourself. And it's the same with corporations. If the music industry, they don't look at Napster and they don't look at Spotify, and Spotify will feel that they can attack them, and that's what's happened. So, but what I did is I went to martial arts studios and I compete with them, and they beat me up really badly. So it's quite hard to write books when you're dyslexic.
But hold on there.
Yeah.
Did you just step into a martial arts studio and said, bring it on? Or
Yeah,
what?
I told them I'm interested to train this kind of ballet you having here with this really cool clothes. So I was making them quite aggressive. I said to them, I'm thinking of training this martial art, and I tried a lot of things. And I said, but before I do that, I like to try if it's really something that I could believe in. And since I'm raised in the sort of the tough neighborhood, I don't believe you have a chance with me. So why don't we step into the ring and I see if you have something to come with. If you can beat me, then I understand this is good to train. So that's what I did, and I was really shocked because they really beat me up, nearly broke my leg and ribs and so on. And the more they were beating me up, the more happy I was. So they threw me out and I said, "You strange, you're not welcome here." But I was so happy because I admire people who are good at what they're doing, and they're really good. And also I could see it worked.
This guy is really good at beating me up.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, because my weight was over 100 kilo, and they were turning my strength, my weight against me. So I found it really good and useful. And so, but if I should return to those martial art studios, I will turn out the light, because that's how sharks operate. They don't operate by the rules; they operate by winning. And in the darkness, I will kittle them. So, because I don't like to fight, but that's how sharks work. They don't work by having a black belt and doing the same movement that everybody else is doing. They just take a bite and keep on doing that. So, so that's my point. Weakness and strengths can be the same, but most, I would say, business fields there are, like the banking industry, the finance industry, before the music industry, they're waking up, the car industry waking up. There's a challenge in every field there is nowadays, and they're called Tesla and Virgin, and those who challenge them are proving that they need to move, they need to do things. But most business fields that's old and successful, like insurance and so on, they're fat and happy and lazy. So there's a need for them to start moving. That's what I'm saying. And I like to thank Tesla and Elon Musk and those for proving there's a need for moving. Otherwise, they wouldn't hire me. So, like the construction industry, I've done many lectures for them. So,
you also you have not only studied sharks, but you actually in a very let's say careful and quite I guess cumbersome way, you reached out to criminals and criminal organizations even to study actually how they worked. Can you tell us about that story?
Yeah, I'm curious, like a 2 years old kid. So and that can make me end up in a dangerous situation. So it did take me a couple of years to get those interviews, and I found the criminals really interesting because there's very few things you can't do, and there's a lot of really smart people at the top, and some of them I was doing interviews with. And that was in many ways sometimes really stupid, but I really like to learn how they think. And I also done interviews with Secret Service and the police and those. And the relationship between the police and the criminals are actually the same as with sharks and prey. Both are level up their strategies and try to be more successful. And the criminals, they for instance, they like the digitalization because that's the best thing that's ever happened in their industry, they're saying. Because they don't need to beat up people, and you can be dressed like a bank man, and you can have a normal time you can have family time and so on. So that's good to know. But what I found interesting in the criminal life is how do you stay alive, for instance, and in that. And one person told me it's if you think more about money than your own life, you probably will die soon in this kind of business. So the deals you say no to is the ones that keep you alive.
So greed basically is the downfall.
Yeah. When greed take over your instinct, if you sit in a room and there's millions in the room, you're thinking more about the millions than your gut feeling that something is wrong and you should go out from the room alive. That's the time when you probably get killed in that field. And I found it really interesting and useful because in business also there are deals you should say no to because it will kill your brand. In the long term, for instance, you get the wrong distributor in a country and so on, working with the wrong people, that will lead to trouble in the long run. And it could be good to say no also, but mostly we say yes to money in the business world, so we can learn from them. And there are really smart people in the criminal environment, but they're using their abilities in a way that's not good for society many times. But I think it's there are useful learning points, if you say so.
I mean, like it or not, another friend of mine, he's just made the sort of like observation that criminals are they are kind of like the ultimate entrepreneurs in the sense that, as you said, I mean, they find the ways around obstacles and they solve really tricky problems. And I'm not putting any moral aspect into this. Of course, what they are doing is abominable, of course. But if you just take an objective view as a sort of like lessons in entrepreneurship, the successful ones are good entrepreneurs. Yes.
Yeah, and this can be a bit shocking, but the business world, they use fancy words. They don't do that in the criminal life. And I don't like to make them heroes, but in many cases they are much more better than the business world when it comes to integration.
That's an interesting point.
That's very controversial, but still there is a need for the business world to open up for people coming from as sort of the kind of bad neighborhood and so on, because in the bad neighborhood you don't have so much choice if you don't open up for talent and so on. And I believe that's something I study. I studied a lot of shifts, what's going to shift in society. So I started in 3 different levels, And like in the deepest level, I call it unthinkable. Things are moving and you see things happening. The next level is the possible level, where you see change, you see the shadows of the sharks coming up to the surface. And the visible one is the one we see today. And that's really not something to act on. But I believe one of the things I'm studying right now is talent.
Mm.
So we need to the business world really needs to shape up how they attract talent and how they hire talent. And because if talent only has a way to go to the criminal world if you're from the wrong neighborhood, and then I don't think it's a good situation for society, because the business world need talent. And many times when I ask people what's the education for Zlatan, they don't know, because he scores. And I want it to be the same when it comes to how we hire talent in the business world.
Mm.
And if we look at the talent show for music, singers and so on television, which I do, we can see a 10-year-old or a 9-year-old singing like Whitney Houston, being a great success. They just have a gift from nature. They don't have any education and so on. And sometimes they sing better than the original.
Mm.
If we could have the same situation in the business world, Howard and Oxford and so on will transform into a museum, because we don't need it.
Hmm.
And today we have a situation where talented people spend maybe 1/3 of their lifetime in studying instead of working. Well, maybe we can change that around. So knowledge is really important, but talent may not always be based on reading books. Maybe it should be spent on swimming with me with the sharks instead, because if somebody bites you in the foot, you start to move.
Hmm. Yeah, so of course it's sort of like theory and practice is important, but also what you're saying here is that there is the actual talent pool is usually larger than the pool where companies usually look for talent, right?
Yeah. And sometimes when I do the workshop, I try to have people from different departments. I can see that the one at the top can be a bit challenged when I have people from the bottom, because in the bottom, maybe someone has the gift like Leonardo da Vinci, and they can think three-dimensional, they can see the solution, they can even paint the organization and so on. And sometimes to see that as a threat. And I there's no titles in a workshop. There's no title. That's very unique in Sweden. People don't look at titles; they look at solutions. So and I found that very useful. In America, they're starting to work, and actually, in America and Sweden's management is a perfect mix.
Mm.
Because Swedes they don't care about hierarchy and all of that, and in America, they're starting to use this sort of mixing up. They're really good at decision. In Sweden, we can talk a bit too long about decision, consensus, and so on, and all of that. But I think together it's such a great mix. Actually taking decision, but listening to all the voices in the organization and the customers and so on that IKEA and those organizations do. It's getting really popular. And in America, they're reading a lot of Swedish books from how to be a Swedish farmer and so on. So I think it's really cool. It's a good mix. It's a good mix. You need both.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's only fair because we have been importing quite a large bit of American culture into Sweden. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to hear it's getting exported back,
Yeah.
if nothing else, for the trade balance deficit.
Yes, absolutely.
No,
Yes.
but I think that you have been working with organizations also from all over the world, and can you see some let's say common denominators for the really successful organizations that that you think other organizations can learn from?
Yes. For instance, I think the ones who allow people to be creative in their organization are very successful, like entrepreneur. So there are organizations seeing the problem with that. For instance, Ericsson, a lot of talent and were dropping up and starting up their own corporation. Now they started Ericsson One, so they can stay in the organization and develop their ideas inside of the organization. So that's really important. For instance, if you take some of the most successful corporations in the world, they were really creative in the beginning, but now they end up in a brain drain where a lot of the talent people get they don't get stimulation with their creativity, so they jump off and do something else. You can see that in the beginning that they feel very creative, and also Jim Collins and the ones study evolution in corporation, they can see there's different steps in the evolution of a corporation, and in the beginning we're sort of passionate, we feel immortal, we can do anything, and then we end up in a denial stage. We start to deny the reason for change, and when we deny the reason for change, we end up in this situation, and the whole language in the corporations, I call it a Titanic stage where we feel unsinkable. But just like Richard Branson said,
Titanic state. Okay, yeah, that's a really good and quite chilling label to get as an organization.
Yeah, and also you have if somebody says this boat could sink, the directors often say to that person, you have to clean the boat for 1 week to
don't say
so
that
learn
ever
to be
again.
positive.
Yeah.
Because they're saying if you challenge the status quo in an organization like that, they will say you're negative. So the denial is so strong that actually fire people who want to change things.
It's sort of like the immune system of the organization is getting mobilized, and they try to reject that strange part.
Yeah. Also, I've studied cases where they actually fire people when they do personality testing, and the personality test says this is a person who's willing to take the risks. They fire the person because they don't like to have risk takers in their organization. They only want to have people in sort of, in my opinion, maybe it should be, this is also a bit controversial, but I like to swim in those waters, is like, actually they don't say it directly, but it feels like there's a minimum IQ to work in a certain corporation and certain job, but there's also a maximum. Because like in some cases they don't like to have too creative people who can outsmart the system or finding new ways and so on. So that's
I never heard about that, but it's I can understand sort of like why some corporations would like to do that, and also going back to risk, especially maybe there are definitely, I mean, some if you are like a heart surgeon, maybe you don't want a person with a disregard for risk, of course. But for sure, I mean, this goes back also to actually a question that I would like to ask you, sort of like how can you, I mean, for me at least, I see it's so obvious in many organizations that everything boils down basically to organizational culture, and a culture can be either open and receptive for change and different points of views, or it can be very conform, or it can even be oppressive. And where there will be a culture of silence instead, because they know if you raise your voice, someone will spot you and kill you. So what's if you were the CEO of a big company, and in terms of culture, what would you do in order for enable people to speak up without getting actually, punished for it down the line?
The first thing I will do, I will place some ads for hiring people and saying, this who we are, we want to hire you who are something else.
Mm-hmm.
So really being concrete that we're not swimming in an aquarium, we're swimming in the sea, and we're not here to control the environment. We're here to be a part of the environment, and that makes us more vulnerable, and that makes us more humble for the future. So that's I think culture can be a strength, but culture can also be a weakness. It makes me quite easy to attack them if they have a strong culture in a box. Then I easily can attack them because they will deny the attack all the way to my jobs, getting to the core of the business.
So, sort of like they have their own skewed worldview and kind of like business religion, organizational religion that sort of like don't enable them to face reality really.
Yeah. But there are consultancy working with the culture and like Therese Gedda, for instance, she's which she's a fast swimmer. She moves a lot, so they can speed up their. But I would say I see culture as a system, and many times corporations they have a culture that's based on the beliefs of success, and the beliefs of success is like a bias. Many times it looks more backwards than forwards. So when I get into an organizations, they actually talk more about their history, their success, and base everything they're talking about. It's like they're moving backwards. They think they're moving forwards, but they're moving backwards. For instance, the banking industry. It used to be very modern at the time, but then they feel safe. It's like having the money in the bank and so on. So they feel safe. They lock themselves in. But then you have the challenger, PayPal and those new thinkings. But if the language and the culture are based on the future, moving forward, then it's a whole difference. So what I do, for instance, I move in a stealth mode, so they don't see me. And if they don't see the threat, they will not upgrade their culture before it's too late. But it's the whole system. It's the whole system. And I think one thing that's really makes the culture weak is that human resource often is not connected with the business itself. Is not connected to the strategy. It's not connected to it's not connected to the board and so on. It's lower down in the organization. So I think if you take everything away, what we talk about in the business top, I think everything is about talent, to attract talent and to make them stay. If you have the best talent, then it would be really successful. It's like sharks. They can actually be really good team players. 700 sharks can work together. But if someone performs badly, they can eat them up because cannibalism is something useful in nature. And I think many times it is the same in organization, but we have all these BS words, fancy words. So no one knows what they're talking about in many boards and corporate leaders. Many times I ask them, because they want me to be provocative, I ask them, do you really know what you're talking about right now? Or you just use fancy words? And they get shocked. And even sometimes when I go into this board of directors and so on, they often ask me, can you be provocative? And I said, do you really want me to be provocative and you feel comfortable with that? I could be that, but you still have to pay me afterwards. So I go in, and my opening question thank you. My opening question to them is, who is who is the director of this museum? And they got really shocked, and they start laughing. What do you mean? Well, I think this is a museum. Maybe I'm not allowed to say it, but everything you do is, you've done it for 3 generations. So you really need to upgrade what you're doing. You need to hire people that challenge you. You need to talk with, maybe you should get the new employee which are 20 years old to talk with the CEO about what they're seeing, because it's so easy to get home blind in an organization. It's how we're wired. We want to have safety. We want to feel comfortable. So I know there are consultants who are working with the language. I think the language is really important, how we talk to each other. Are we saying that we are Titanic, we are unsinkable? For instance, I love to read management books from the 70s and so on, saying that Enron and those corporations are immortal, they're going to be there forever. And I think that's really fun to buy the old used book, old management books and so on. And well, all the books are old in many ways, but for instance, I was giving out a new version of Sharkonomics called the Sharkonomics 2. So I upgraded it because what I see now with digitalization, we can't use buzzwords anymore because we're swimming in the digital waters, all of us. Competition is so increasing so much that we really need to challenge ourselves every day in the office. Every day we need to challenge ourselves in many ways. So I think that's really really nice. And because of the situation with the corona, people are more open-minded. And when I do workshop digital, what I found really interesting, many people don't believe me, but what I see now is that people are not only listen to a workshop, actually they're starting to do things now. So I see a lot of better results actually in a corporations where I do digital workshops. And maybe it's because they're not sitting together. Their mind is more connected to themselves.
So that's interesting observation. I have run and facilitated also a lot of digital workshops for the last year, and I was also pleasantly surprised, especially in the beginning, by the output was amazingly good. Definitely not worse than from real workshops, but the only thing lacking is, of course, those interpersonal interactions that you have in a physical workshop, of course. But it works surprisingly good, and maybe one part of it is, as you say, you are more since you're sitting there alone in front of your screen, maybe you're more also of an independent thinker then, instead of just being part of a larger group think, or maybe also larger group dynamics. So maybe that gets a bit more decoupled. And in general, I guess we both agree that Corona has been one of the few positive things with Corona has been sort of like it has not only nudged us, but actually pushed us into this digital, not digital world, but digital work environment where most of us have been working from home. We have been forced to learn how to use tools that maybe many of us hadn't used before. And we are definitely going back to, I mean, when things normalizes, I don't think we'll go back to the way we worked before. These changes will be persistent and a mix of the old and the new, of course.
Yeah, I think it's great to hear that someone else also has that experience, because when I tell people about it, they look at me like, "Are you joking?" You know, do you mean it's more effective to be digital than to be together? Because we wire that we should always be together, we should always sit together, we should hold our hands, we should sing together. We are successful, we are the ones. Blah 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 blah. That doesn't work, in my opinion. I think it's really good, because when we leave the office, we leave the aquarium, we leave the corporate culture, because the corporate culture can lock us up also. It's sort of a consensus lock. Everybody should think the same thing and so on. And when we're sitting at home, we leave the office because there's so many things in a room, in a box. When we're outside of the box, we are more effective to think in new ways. And so I hope that we could do this kind of lectures when we and workshops in the future too, because it's more, I feel more people are so much more centered in themselves, in their own belief. So everybody who's attending at the workshop and your workshop, they're actually CEO. They are the directors of themselves. And that's I think that's and that's allow them to go above the maximum IQ they're about to use before. They can go outside of the title, outside of their Zoom, not Zoom, but the Zoom they're working in. So I found it really amazing.
That's really nice. And Stefan, I think we should round off here. I highly recommend people to check out Stefan and his Sharkonomics 2.0, his updated book with shark tactics for business. And also, Stefan, if they want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
They could Google my name, but easiest is to go to sharkonomics.com, and they can download the first chapter of the book, and they can take the first bite into Sharkonomics. And what I do recommend is look at the level of strategies that I have a model on, and learn from sports, learn from military, learn from other ones. And I think the best in the world when it comes to being having a disruptive strategies is Google, it's Alibaba, it's the digital one. The less history and the more future. And so skip your history and take a bite and go for it. So that's my advice. Go for take a bite of the future. Skip the history.
Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you so much, Peter. You're a great swimmer, and great fun to swim and play with you for the future.
Yeah, but I still need my life vest, I feel. Thank you very much, Stefan. Looking forward to see you soon again. All right.
The same. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.